You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
This episode of Mission Log is sponsored by Rocket Money. Stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/missionlog. That's rocketmoney.com/missionlog, rocketmoney.com/missionlog.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 524, 1.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm Norman Lau.
And I'm John Champion. Each week on Mission Log, we climb out of the stasis chambers long enough to give a long look at an episode of Star Trek, and then, in our waking moments, explore it for morals, meanings, and messages, and ask ourselves if the whole thing stands the test of time.
This week, 1. The one where 7 of 9 starts hallucinating again, and finds herself being 1 of 2. Then 1 of 1. And that really is the loneliest number.
I'll be back with some trivia for you, but first, Norman would like to remind all of you how to reach us.
Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Drop us a line at missionlog@roddenberry.com and join us on X and Facebook at Mission Log Pod. While you're at it, leave us a review and a rating at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. And please remember your comments could be used on Mission Log or Engage on the Roddenberry YouTube channel. And now here's John Champion with this week's trivia.
All right, we have a story and a teleplay written by Jeri Taylor, and she gets the sole credit here, but alas, that is almost never the case with a TV script. We need to go back to a pitch given by a British novelist named James Swallow. He had been pitching on earlier Trek series, but never made a sale. He had a concept about the Doctor being the only awake crew member on Voyager and experiencing hallucinations. It was Brian Fuller who bought that pitch, and it was Brannon Braga who agreed with Brian on the opportunity for some cool, creepy, dream state imagery. The assignment was picked up by Jeri Taylor, though, and it was in this process that the focus shifted away from the Doctor and as a way to explore 7 of 9 in a situation where she was wholly cut off from the Voyager crew. This episode was directed by Kenneth Biller, and this is only the second Star Trek directing credit for Ken, and it is his final for the entire series. Of course, we know Ken more as a writer-producer, but he sat in the director's chair from time to time, with his very first credit being earlier in Season 4 with the episode Revulsion. Since his time on Trek, Ken directed for 9 more series, with his most recent being the Hulu series, The Cleaning Lady. Oh, and a little bit of a prop reuse to mention here in the episode. Those stasis chambers are holdovers from The Thaw back in Voyager's second season. Let's meet our guest stars. We have a Borg drone played by Ron Ostro. Now, around this time, Ron was making a handful of TV guest appearances, but shortly after, he had a regular role on the Aaron Sorkin show Sports Night. That connection worked out because a few years later, he was back with a recurring gig as a reporter on another Sorkin show, The West Wing. This is Ron's only Trek appearance, but he is no stranger to sci-fi, having also turned up in everything from Dark Skies to Firefly and the comedy 2010, A Kitchen Odyssey. Trajas Low-Tarek is played by Wade Williams, and Wade has been working non-stop since the mid-90s, from comedies to sci-fi and action shows to feature films. He has provided his voice talent for at least 5 different Batman projects and countless other animated shows and games. He's appeared in Buffy, Westworld. He had a long recurring role in Prison Break and another recurring in The Bernie Mac Show. While this is the first time we're meeting him on Star Trek, Wade will be back for one more appearance on Enterprise.
Welcome to your new accommodations in the Delta Quadrant. 1 bedroom, no bathroom, and if you try to leave it, you'll be deep fried. Enjoy your stay.
Prologue. Seven of Nine approaches Harry and B'Elanna in the mess hall while they are having a meal together. She engages with them, at first with a series of what appears to be a harmless series of questions of a curious and personal nature, which quickly turns into more of an interrogation than a get-to-know-you conversation. The Doctor orders the holodeck to freeze program and continues to criticize Seven for not understanding the session's lesson, how to get along with your coworkers. Seven evades the Doctor's questioning and would rather submit herself to her weekly physical than endure any more of this pointless program. The holodeck, not the Doctor. Or perhaps both. On the bridge, Janeway and the crew look on through the view screen while approaching a Mutara-class nebula, which, according to Tuvok's sensors, is so large that it would be better to traverse through it than around it. Before Janeway can wonder if there's coffee in there, the crew, starting with Harry, all begin doubling over in pain as sores and burns begin to form on their faces and hands. Act 1. As their injuries worsen, Janeway orders Tom to reverse course, but he is rendered unconscious by searing pain. Tuvok manages to ignore his own affliction and pilots Voyager into safe space. Janeway hails the Doctor to report this strange phenomenon, only to be met with his similar bewilderment as he watches crewmen pour into sickbay, suffering from radiation burns. He sends Seven with dermal regenerators to render medical aid to the bridge, and upon arriving, she discovers one crewman already burned beyond saving. Once the crew is stabilized, Seven and Janeway reconvene in astrometrics, where a more accurate three-dimensional sensor map of the Mutara-class nebula is on display. Much to Janeway's and Seven's dismay, it appears the span of the nebula would divert them over a year to circumvent. Unwilling to lose any more travel time to just a nebula, Janeway is determined to go through it. The Doctor proposes that stasis chambers would shield the crew from the subnucleonic radiation that afflicted them earlier as Voyager approached just the outer borders of the nebula. However, the conditions of this plan are of extreme risk. 1. The entire crew would have to be put into stasis. 2. Only the Doctor and Seven, whose Borg-enhanced physiology seems to be immune to the radiation's effects, will be responsible for not only maintaining the health of the crew, but also the maintenance of the ship. And 3, the crew will have to be in stasis for a month. Later in Cargo Bay 2, Janeway and Seven come to a very tenuous agreement about Seven's responsibilities. Janeway shares her concerns about Seven functioning alone, as Borg aren't accustomed to doing, but it seems they have no choice but to follow the Doctor's plan, and under the Doctor's command. Seven reassures the captain that she can do this. Afterwards, in the briefing room, Janeway also convinces her officers to go along with the Doctor's plan. And even though Chakotay has his reservations, Janeway asks him to place his trust not just in Seven, but in his captain as well. As the crew assembles on Deck 14 and readies themselves in their individual stasis chambers, a very unsettled and nervous Tom Paris is reassured that if anything goes wrong, he can always unlock his unit from the inside. Just in case. Act 2. According to Seven's personal log, Voyager is on its 10th day through the Mutara Nebula. In that time, she has been able to maintain a very efficient daily routine, including monitoring the health and well-being of the crew and their stasis chambers, allocating the required time for nutritional supplements, and making minor course corrections to maintain Voyager's optimal flight path through the nebula. Oh, there's also the occasional and almost literal stumbling across an unconscious Tom Paris who has managed to escape his stasis chamber more than once. As time passes, Seven and the Doctor continue to grate on each other, more so than before, a condition the Doctor believes is due to Seven enduring undue stress. He tries once again at the therapeutic holodeck simulation where Seven can learn to engage and rely not just on the efficiency of the crew, but their camaraderie as well. The latter is where Seven still lacks a certain connection to her own humanity, an observation that leads to more friction between her and the Doctor. However, this lesson will have to wait as the computer alarms them to a catastrophic failure which will result in an immediate warp core breach. The Doctor heads to the bridge to check the main engineering sensors, while Seven runs headlong into the engineering section where she encounters nothing. No hull breach, no antimatter explosions, nothing. Act 3. Upon further investigation, the Doctor discovers that the bioneural gel packs are corroding and corrupting computer functions. After isolating one of the affected gel pack hubs located at the end of a Jeffries tube and analyzing the problem, the Doctor's transmission begins to fluctuate. He believes his mobile emitter is being affected by the radiation, and they need to reach the safety of his main emitter array in sickbay at once before his program completely degrades. Once in sickbay, Seven and the Doctor are able to regroup and analyze the extent of what is happening, not only to Voyager's gel packs, but also to the Doctor's emitter. They confirm that the radiation is not only dangerous to humans, but also, to a lesser degree, to technology. The Doctor believes he is no longer safe to leave the confines of sickbay, where his emitters are strong enough to keep him online as long as he never leaves. Meaning, it is up to Seven to stay the course and to service all of Voyager's needs by herself for the duration of their course through the nebula. After waking from a rather strange dream of being alone and stranded on a glacier, Seven recounts that 29 days have passed and that she is being affected by her prolonged isolation and that even her dreams have been disturbing. But she is determined to fulfill her assigned duty, even if Voyager herself is unable to keep pace, as Seven encounters cascading failures due to the increased degradation of the bioneural gel packs. While making her rounds, she believes to have heard Tom Paris cry out for help, but discovers soon after that he is secure in his stasis chamber. Shortly after, Seven is alerted to an approaching ship. She meets with its pilot, Tragus Loteric, an alien with a certain duplicitous arrogance who is trying to traverse the nebula to be the first of his kind to do so. As Seven tries to negotiate a trade for much-needed liquid helium, Loteric inquires about her loneliness and that he understands. His threatening advances force Seven to defend herself at phaser point, and she escorts him post-haste to the transporter room. But she is distracted by another cry for help by Tom Paris, and in her confusion, Loteric escapes around a distant corridor. Seven contacts the Doctor and informs him that they have an intruder on board. Act 4. Regrouping with the Doctor in sickbay, Seven updates him on her encounter with Loteric. Meanwhile, the computer continues to broadcast system failures that Seven must address, regardless of Loteric roaming freely aboard Voyager. After closely observing Seven's current anxious state, the Doctor asks if she is frightened, to which she simply retorts, "I am Borg." Armed with a heavy phaser rifle, Seven sets out to ensure that her duty and the trust that Janeway and the crew placed in her was well-founded. First and foremost, to address all shipwide technical emergencies, and secondly, to deal with Loteric. As she roams the corridors to do just that, Loteric taunts her over the comm system, forcing Seven to hear and see things that are simply and logically impossible, such as Janeway and the crew's voices crying out for help, or finding Tom and Harry strewn about on the floor of engineering, suddenly bursting into flames. Seven quickly regroups her mental faculties and focuses on creating countermeasures to subdue and contain Loteric, such as having him admit to being isolated on the bridge so she can cut off his oxygen supply. But to no avail, because as soon as she informs the Doctor that she's captured Loteric, he appears in engineering where even a well-placed center-mass phaser beam from Seven's rifle can't stop him. However, when the Doctor arrives on the scene, explaining all the while that he fixed his emitter, he finds Seven pointing her phaser rifle and threatening someone who isn't there. The Doctor explains that she is, in fact, hallucinating because the radiation is also affecting her Borg implants. Just then, the EPS conduits overload, and the Doctor has to take himself offline for good because his program is currently tied into the EPS mainframe. Seven is now alone and has to finish the journey through the nebula by herself. Act 5. As Seven and Voyager draw closer to reaching the other side of the nebula, Seven's condition worsens. She tries desperately to focus on the tasks at hand, which are crucial for keeping Voyager and the stasis chambers functioning, but the voices in her head, resulting from the constant degradation of her Borg implants, are increasingly distracting. While performing tasks in astrometrics and on the bridge, Seven is confronted by deformed and radiation-scarred visions of her crewmates who constantly berate her as a failure and someone who never should have been trusted, especially by Janeway. From corridor to corridor, Seven is accosted by a Borg drone who accuses her of being weak, of being human, of being an isolated and singular being, of being simply one. On her way to the bridge, Seven encounters a vision of the gateway to a Borg cube and an invitation to rejoin the collective, to be more than just one. However, Seven's determination outweighs all of the combined might of her own self-doubt, manifested in the barrage of hallucinations of those intent on proving to her that she is alone, a failure, and unworthy of her crew's trust. In order to provide enough power for Voyager to make it through the nebula, Seven must risk using her own life support to keep the stasis chambers online. When she is on the verge of making it through the nebula, she falls unconscious near the doorway of Deck 14. After a time, Seven awakens in sickbay, surrounded by the Doctor, Chakotay, and Janeway. They inform her that they made it through the nebula thanks to Seven and the trust they placed in her. Later in the mess hall, she approaches B'Elanna, Tom, and Harry, asking if she could simply be in their company. Tom wonders why he kept trying to escape his stasis chamber, something Seven reflects upon and suggests that perhaps Tom just disliked being alone. The end.
Norman, I have to ask, who among us has not stumbled over an unconscious Tom Paris from time to time?
I tried not to daily.
Yeah. So, we can understand exactly what they're going through on board. Well, let's kick things off here. Right at the top, I thought it was a very funny conceit how to open the show, and I thought Jerry Ryan played it perfectly. Just the rapid-fire, inappropriate questions. Like, this was fun.
Although I do like that we learned that Harry's from South Carolina.
Yes.
He enjoys volleyball.
Yeah.
And Chakotay saved B'Elanna's life. So, yeah, I kind of thought the whole sequence was pretty successful.
Yeah. I wonder, I guess the computer is putting that together from publicly available records.
It was Space MySpace.
Yeah. Right. There you go. Spacebook. Yeah. Because maybe Chakotay and or B'Elanna have entered that information into their bios about how they met, because otherwise, because Seven is asking about something that is technically illegal. So how did you join the Maquis? Oh, let me look this up, And we have, now I couldn't get confirmation if it was the same effects plate, because it has been used in other Star Trek before, but we have a Mutara-class nebula here.
Okay, so because it's one of my favorite films, and depending on the day, it's my favorite film of all time.
Right.
So I've always heard of it referenced in Star Trek II as the Mutara Nebula.
Yeah.
Not a Mutara Nebula.
Yeah.
At 153 Mark IV.
Yeah.
So I just want to keep that pronoun in place.
Yeah.
A or the, or is that a pronoun? The,
yeah.
Is that an adjective, preposition?
Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
Sorry, grammar people. I know that
yes.
I've been,
as
that's
they cringe.
not me.
Yeah. But there is a point in the episode, and I'm kind of skipping up to here we go. So at the top of Act 2, Seven actually calls it the Mutara Nebula instead of Mutara-class nebula. Obviously it can't be the same place because we're on the other side of the galaxy. A little weird there. Mm-hmm.
Sorry about the cringiness, and also speaking of cringiness. So watch Chakotay when he doubles over in pain, because that is a Shatner-worthy performance. It really is. It's like his hands articulate in a very unbelievable yet like cringy kind of way. Like, I can't believe I'm actually acting like this kind of way.
Really committing to it,
Yeah.
But all of that stuff I thought was, creepy and weird. And it took a minute for anyone to decide that, okay, they should just, stop and back up from where they are. Like, all of this just like, guys, are you not putting this together that the closer you get into this thing, it's just getting worse? So back off.
I'm going to dip my toe in the fire. Yeah. That's hot. I think I'm going to pull my toe out of the fire because it's not hot.
Right. It is very convenient that the dead crewman is somebody that we've never heard of before, never seen before. So that's very helpful for storytelling. Mm-hmm.
I do love seeing that three-dimensional map of a Mutara Nebula, because I just love seeing the density and kind of like the three-dimensional mass, and how Janeway and Seven are trying to look at plotting their course around or through it. I thought it was very effective as a graphic.
It made me wonder, actually, how big can a nebula be? Because it's just collections of gas and stuff. It could be absolutely massive. Certainly something that would take that long for Voyager to go through. Couldn't go around it.
The big philosophical question here, John, is one, what does God need with a starship? And two, can God create a nebula so vast that even he himself can't traverse
go through it? Yeah. It's a good question. Yeah. I thought it was interesting that Seven was okay during the exposure to a Mutara-class nebula, but she is still mostly organic material. You know, I'll always go back to that where the doctor said that he removed 80% of the Borg technology. So I guess the Borg tech, the nanoprobes, is going to overtime repairing her while the radiation is taking its toll. It's not really necessary to know, but it was convenient that she was the only one who was spared other than the doctor. Also, how do they have this many stasis units? There's 140 plus, minus the dead crewmen, 140 plus people on board.
Savage!
Well, they just killed them. They just got rid of them. Like, oh, good thing that we lost one because we only had so many stasis units to go around. One was going to stay out. Well, ever since we picked up 7, we got an extra crewman on board. So, you know.
True.
And so I wonder, like, are they manufacturing these on board? And if so, with what resources? And by the way, if you can do this, you could keep doing this. You could just keep putting your crew into stasis from time to time. Oh, we have to traverse this, months-long, bleak, dead section of space here. So, all right, everybody into the tubes.
Yeah. Replicator rations are really strictly monitored, right? So how do they build all those stasis chambers? Because that's a lot of energy and matter and stuff that they don't have.
And if you're just traveling with them, I mean, do you automatically assume that every ship, does the Enterprise D have over 1,000 stasis tubes on it, one for every single person on board?
Right.
Gotta wonder, right?
You got to.
Yeah. And I do. There was a line there about the stasis tubes, like, well, there are things that can go wrong. And I thought, yeah, absolutely. See also Planet of the Apes, The Twilight Zone, Space 1999, and other episodes of Star Trek. So those would all be helpful as a reference point. And apparently, Starfleet crews have done this already for longer than a month. I want to know where. I want to know what ships. I want to know for how long, because it's just the thing that we do. Then that's just the thing that we can do from now on. Good shot of those tubes and then kind of extending it with the mat. I thought that was kind of cool.
Here's a small suggestion for people who may escape their stasis chambers.
Yeah.
You can always lock the stasis chambers.
You could. You could just.
How would they know?
Just be banging on it from the inside.
Just a little bit of solder, a little bit of a welding torch, and there you go. No Tom Paris problems.
That guy is sedative. Jeez.
We have a 47 reference in this episode. The only one that I could find so far. 7 says to the computer, adjust heading by 0.347 degrees starboard.
Yeah.
And then the computer says course adjusted. So we have 47.
We do have that. We also, we have a little snippy dialogue between already between 7 and the Doctor. Yeah.
You're getting short-tempered. You're getting short-tempered.
Right.
So, yeah.
Love that bit. I love going to the mess hall and seeing everybody in their civilian clothes. Very cool. A lot of fun. Maybe not quite as good with civilian clothes as we've seen before, but it's always nice when they make a return. And since this is a holodeck simulation, it's kind of interesting to note that it's the Voyager computer helping 7 to make those calculations. Like so think about it. Like, she goes in, and of course the pretense is that she's no fun at a party, but the fun part is she's in there talking about calculations. All these other characters come around, but those characters are created by the holodeck computer.
You know, it's interesting seeing somebody like that in a party situation, because I've been to party situations where it's a work function. Mm-hmm. So the first thing that you start doing at the party is, well, first you get like a plate of food and then you get a drink. Then all of a sudden, if you're like standing with people that you don't really know all that well, like 7 was with these people, you start talking about work just kind of organically. So like, can't we talk about anything else but work? But, sure, as soon as we're done talking about work. Yeah. So I found that kind of relatable. Mm-hmm. Seeing the third binaural gel pack at the end of the Jeffries tube, it was kind of like grayish and dead. I thought that was a really nice detail. You saw 2 really kind of like nice, healthy, like Romulan ale blue ones, and then this one was kind of dead and drained. So that was smart.
Yeah, that was cool.
Smart decision.
Yeah. Throughout this, we're increasingly worried about the Doctor and his system may go completely offline. Is the Doctor not aware that he has a backup? Or wait, the backup is lost on that planet where the Vaskans and Kyrians, I can't remember who they are exactly, but maybe this is a good reason to set up a new backup because, If he is aware that he lost a backup at one point, maybe they should just create a new backup.
I have like 3 redundant hard drives.
Yeah, exactly.
Just in case like all of my data gets
That's
lost.
what you do.
One of them's in a fire safe. One of them's offsite.
Yeah, you don't even have a holographic doctor. Imagine if you did. You'd be like, yeah, give me extra copies of this.
Seeing Voyager pass through visualizes folks like close your eyes, think about this wonderful purple and pink nebula. Yeah. It reminds me of like the digital art done in this other animated series. You got to give all the credit in the world to these digital artists that did it, because I'm sure they are prodigies in their own right.
Nicely done. That's very good. I like meeting our alien friend here, Lotaric. His delivery is just so strange because he's like a little smarmy. He's a little too chatty. And seeing, obviously we learn that he is a hallucination, but like, where did this guy come from, buried in the recesses of Borg memory? I thought he was just so weird to watch.
I'm so glad that you actually brought up the recesses of Borg memory, because I do have something specific to say about Lotaric with the same kind of issue that I had with Coven. And they seem similar in so many respects. And I have a very specific note, past discussion in our VAM, which can only get if you listen to the uncut version of this. On Patreon.
Okay.
So.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Every time the computer voice slowed down, it just made me think, like, is this on reel-to-reel tape somewhere? Like, would that happen? Because I don't know that it would, but it clearly conveyed what we needed it to convey. I like the little exchange. Are you frightened? I am Borg. Great way to evade the question. That was and perfectly in character. Loved it. And I love the little bit of like shades of Die Hard that we get, and other action films too, but Die Hard really memorably, where we hear Tragus, we hear Lotaran over the comms while Seven like wanders around the ship, putting out various fires, literally and figuratively. I thought that was very cool.
Oh, yeah, because like right in one of those next scenes, she watches Harry and Tom burn up as a hallucination. So, very good effect. Yeah, that would be neat if like Tragus was our Lotaric. Yeah. That's his full name, Tragus Lotaric. Yeah. He was saying like, so, Mr. Do you think you can actually beat us, Mr. Cowboy?
Yeah, all we need is a well-placed yippee-ki-yay from 7 of 9.
That's right. I love when the warp core turns Borg green. That's a very specific green in Star Trek.
It is.
When Lotaric says, "You're Borg." The whole kind of lighting system changes.
So cool.
Here's something that I thought was interesting. So when Lotaric storms into engineering, Seven shoots him immediately. Take a note, Chakotay. This is what you do to intruders when they board your ship unannounced.
Great. Good tip.
Right? I mean, getting shot like that is kind of unforgettable.
Yeah. I guess, I don't know how thick a nebula is, but as we're losing time here, as Voyager is trying to get to the edge of the nebula, I kept thinking again, I believe it was my friend Norman who pointed out that inertia is a thing in space, that if a ship is just going, that it would just keep going. But, who am I to nitpick like that?
I don't know about that guy.
I thought it was a very good illustration of the trolley problem here. Sacrificing a few to save many would be an efficient plan, as Tuvok points out.
I'm just wondering, why she didn't make her way to get an environmental suit?
Oh my!
Those things have like hours of oxygen or life-saving technology that could allow her to not only stay alive, but also stay conscious.
And she's been in them a few times. It's not a foreign concept to her. Yeah, exactly. I thought, what a really lovely scene at the end. A perfect bookend to the funny opening with the holodeck simulation of Seven wanting to explore social dynamic with the crew. And I thought it was just such a nice way to bookend this, and Seven's unease was really palatable, and everybody else was so welcoming. And I thought, we should have seen this before now. This is the scene that I wanted much, much earlier. But it was lovely to see. But I guess if I had just one more nitpick, they keep talking about the soup and how the soup is good, or at least palatable, or at least edible. But Tom Paris, it looks like he was eating a great big barbecue pork bow, not soup. So I don't know who made either the right or wrong choice there.
Clearly Tom had one thing on his mind the whole time he was failing to stay in his stasis pod: pepperoni pizza.
We'll get right back to one after a word from this week's sponsor, Rocket Money. I have been in this exact same situation. I was helping members of my family go through subscriptions, and not only do you forget about things maybe you signed up for and you don't need anymore, and waiting for those, you find it, and then you realize, like, oh, wait, it's not going to expire for another month or 2 or 3. I wish I could get out of this. And then the worst thing is when you find a subscription and you realize, wait a minute, as I did in my own family, you're paying twice because different people signed up for the same exact thing at separate times, and now you're paying double for the same subscription. That's where a service like Rocket Money comes in to help you out to find those subscriptions and get rid of the ones that you don't need. Did you know that nearly 75% of people have subscriptions that they've forgotten about? I believe it because I just told you that was happening in my own family. So, yeah, multiply that. It is very likely if you're in a room with 4 people, 3 of them have forgotten about subscriptions. So, yeah, if you asked me to put a number on it, I would not be able to tell you how many subscriptions I or my family had, but I can tell you that we have trimmed that down a bit. And between streaming services, fitness apps, delivery services, there are so many. But thanks to Rocket Money, we're no longer wasting money on the things that we have forgotten about.
Rocket Money is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. Here's how you can do that,
yes,
John.
I like growing savings.
Because
let's do that.
Mm-hmm. You have experience with doing this. I have done this the same way myself. You take a look at your expenses, you kind of find those little gaps in logic where, like, where did that money go? Well, with Rocket Money, you can take full control over your subscriptions and get that top-down view of these expenses. You can see all of them in one place. And if you see something that you don't want or something that seems a little off to you, Rocket Money can help you cancel those unwanted subscriptions with just a few taps. The dashboard's so easy to use. It shows you your month's spending compared to last month. You can see where your savings are going to be. You can see where your expenditures are going and how bad your habits can get, because they can kind of get out of control every once in a while. So Rocket Money will also help create your custom budget and keep your spending on track. So it's nice to have those goals and milestones in place so you're not overspending and you're getting better spending habits in the process, right? So Rocket Money will even try to negotiate to lower your bills for you by up to 20%. That's also super helpful.
Huge.
And all you have to do, like, I don't know, John, is like, if you're comfortable taking a shot of your bill and sending it to Rocket Money, they'll take care of the rest. They'll deal with customer service.
Do it. That's a yes, that's worth it. 100%. Rocket Money has over 5 million users, and they have saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions. That is incredible, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's features.
Stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/missionlog. That's rocketmoney.com/missionlog. rocketmoney.com/missionlog.
All right, let's hit our discussion points here. For one, very interesting episode as we spend most of our time either with Seven or with Seven and imagined versions of the crew, either hallucinated or holodeck or a little bit of real world. So if you think about it, those actors, they were actually playing up to 3 different versions of themselves in this episode.
Yeah.
Kind of cool, right?
Yeah.
There's a line here that I think is revealing. Maybe it's not the most important, and it's certainly a little bit obvious, but I like this little bit of Janeway wisdom that we get dispensed to Seven. She says, we always feel better if we think we're in control of our own circumstances. And to me, it's just like, well, that is so obvious that it is painful how obvious that is. Yes.
Does it need to be that obvious for 7 of 9?
But see, that is such a good question, because I watched that and I thought, okay, obvious bit of dialogue here, but it's also kind of explaining a bit of psychology that presumably 7 has never encountered before. Because I would think in the Borg mindset, either you are in control of the thing or you are not in control of the thing. This is a little bit of human finessing that we do, where it's almost just like getting into the mindset of saying, well, I can be in control of this thing. Even if realistically I'm not exactly or not 100%, I need to find it within myself to put myself in control of this bizarre circumstance. I wish that we'd spend a little longer moment with that, because I wanted to know how that registered with 7 of 9. Again, I don't think it's like the most important thing in the episode, but as a human, watching a human try to describe to someone being more human, that is a thing that I really related to. And I was like, yeah, I can think of many of the times in my life that I've been afraid, and it all stems from a lack of control. That is such a fundamentally human experience.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's something that I, too, was hoping that would be reconciled at the end. You brought up in observations, it was nice to see 7 approach B'Elanna and Harry and now Tom at the end, just to bookend, the awkwardness of the beginning with kind of like the reconciliation of her journey and her arc in this episode. And this would have been another one of those kind of milestones to help her, the evolution or understanding the evolution of where she is. But yeah, it's a tough thing to reconcile how very little control many of us believe we actually have in our lives.
Okay, actually, let's go with that for a second, because think about those 2 scenes that bookend the episode, and think about those in terms of control. And that opening scene in the holodeck, that exercise 7 of 9 is doing, that is a way for her to maintain social control and distance from from a true interaction. Because if all you're doing is barking out questions to get a binary answer from somebody, that really doesn't serve the purpose at all to build a relationship. But giving up a little bit of control, allowing yourself that kind of gray area of not knowing where a conversation is going to go exactly, that is a vulnerable position, because the next thing that person is going to do is ask you a reciprocal question. And it's nice to see that even just that physicality change in 7 of 9 between those 2 scenes, that really stiff, kind of commanding presence she has at the beginning to that loosened up, just softened a little bit, really indicating like, well, I'm here now to learn from you, and I really want you to allow me in. That was really sweet. Yeah.
Well, I think that kind of dovetails into what is happening to 7 in this episode in terms of the breaking or the cracking of her psychological armor, her Borg armor. There's this, you brought this up in observations too, there's this wonderful, very curt exchange between the Doctor and 7. The Doctor says, 7, are you frightened? And 7 says, I am Borg. That's it. Then she leaves Med Bay, she straps on her rifle, she does the Rambo thing, and she takes out, she does what she needs to do. But it reminded me of this interaction with 7 and Harry at the beginning of the Omega Directive. Harry says, is there anything you don't know, to 7? And 7 says, I was Borg. Yeah. And then Harry repeated, I was Borg. Now, I'm not exactly sure if the writers of these 2 different episodes ever kind of like converse or kind of like look at each other's notes, but there's a difference between saying I was Borg and I am Borg. The former is a statement of fact. The latter is something I think she's using as a way to convince herself that she hasn't changed.
100%. I love that you pointed that out because, remember, this is written by Jerry Taylor, who has had such a hand in crafting who these characters are. And even, you and I come on this show and we might complain, from time to time about, once or twice, but, the lack of an arc or missed opportunities or that kind of thing. But this is really one of those found opportunities where I have to imagine it was on purpose. You go back to that scene that you just mentioned in Omega, or again, for our listeners across the pond, the Omega directive. That was a breakthrough moment for her to say, I was. But the stiffening, trying to find the self-resolve in the face of fear by reminding herself, I am Borg. It's not even to remind herself. It's also to kind of tell the Doctor, is this sort of stealing of her wits. It is so revealing in only 3 words.
It's like the exchange with, and I brought this up earlier because it's always like living rent-free in the back of my mind, the exchange between Kirk and God, or the God figure in Star Trek V. You can very much overlay that here. The Doctor asks Seven, are you scared? Or are you frightened? And then she turns around, am I frightened?
Yeah.
Don't you know who I am? I am Borg.
Yeah.
Right? Don't you understand that?
Yeah.
Like, what about this equation don't you understand?
Yeah.
Right? And it's kind of chilling in a way.
Yeah. I really like it. This is kind of a minor point, but I think back at the beginning, like, I get that there might be a reason or two to be a little bit wary of leaving 7 of 9 in charge. I mean, they do have the Doctor there. They don't know that the Doctor is going to go offline. But this, particularly the scene where Chakotay is challenging Janeway on her decision, like, are you sure you can trust her? Yes, we've seen 7 of 9 do some things that were out of control. I think we're past those days. I would also think that there are tons and tons of safety protocols that are built into the ship for a situation like this. But I wondered if you made anything of that scene other than just like, we need to address it, or we need to address it in order to justify that we're doing this, because by doing this, that's the only way the plot is going to work.
Well, I really did like Chakotay and Janeway coming back to form as captain, first officer, and also these 2 very close friends.
Absolutely. Yep.
I think that's something that's been missing throughout the course of this season, because obviously there's a huge reshuffling of the deck chairs with losing Cass and adding or Jennifer, and then bringing in Jerry with 7 of 9, and having to basically kind of like ramp start like her entire arc in less than 1 season so far. So a lot of kind of like the subtleties and some of the character development has been lost over the course of the last 20-something episodes, and it's nice to get them back in place where they were, like, say, at the end of Scorpion. Like, they were unresolved. Their resolutions were unresolved in that episode, and now it's not so much even like trusting 7 as trusting Janeway again.
Yeah.
Like, if I trust you, I will trust her.
Yeah.
Like, if I will trust Janeway, then I will, by extension, trust 7, because you're speaking for her.
Right. But, here's what's interesting about what a big leap that is. Like, 100%, that scene between Chakotay and Janeway is nice to see because it is a return to form. We haven't really had that, and it's nice to see that in a working professional relationship and friendship. Mm-hmm. But this episode then goes to this very disturbing and dark, painful personal exploration into Seven's identity and her identity crisis and this feeling of abandonment, which we've been in before, this violation that she experienced in Raven. Like, this is all really rich character stuff, but it's also realistically very disturbing and very dark. 7 is simultaneously the most vulnerable and the most capable member of the crew. I think that's what makes her so interesting. And look, we could complain and say, there's too much attention on 7 of 9. Yeah, but when you've got something that rich to work with as a writer, you kind of have to go for it. I was thinking, though, as Janeway and Chakotay are having this conversation, is it even fair to ask this of 7 of 9? Is anybody else on board aware of how vulnerable she is, other than maybe the doctor, because he's been helping her with this stuff, and maybe if his psychological subroutines are still running, he might be aware of it. But is it even fair? Did anybody stop to think, or maybe it would have been tipping the hand of the episode a little too hard at the beginning to say, is this okay to leave this person who we have taken away only, 9-10 months ago, from the only place that she has ever known as a home, which by definition is billions of beings that form a collective network, Is it fair to do that? Throw her into the situation where we all say, well, we're your friends, we're your family now, and then say, by the way, we're going to be gone for the next, next month, and you have to do all of this on your own. Is that in any way fair to her at all?
See, that's where I think they're picking and choosing what she is and isn't to them.
Yeah. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And you can kind of see that by example in any of the other, I would say, super-powered characters, in Star Trek. The way that they would treat an Odo or a Data, or a Spock. Any of the characters that have the ability to be whatever you need them to be in order to facilitate whatever you need them to accomplish, because no one in your crew is capable of doing that. I do fault that as a point of a Deus Ex Machina type of crutch that writers always use, but I won't in this episode, because I feel in this episode it's earned from the exact same episode you just brought up. And I'm glad that we write our notes independently, because the Raven was a watermark, a high point in this season, where we learn why Seven is how she is, why she has that certain anxiety complex, why she has a certain weakness that can be exploited, and why she has that point to prove. Like, I can do this. I need to prove to you that I can. Because with the Borg, she didn't have to prove anything, because they were expected to function, period. But for this collective that she's in, she has to be able to show that she belongs, because without belonging to a higher collective, she is, in fact, accepting that she is one, or weaker, or lesser than. Which is ironic, because at the point at the end of this episode is that one is being stronger than many.
Yeah.
Based on her own self-worth, accepting her own self-worth.
Yeah. But, that's an interesting place to put her, though, because we've spent so much time in the series thus far with Seven emphasizing how, okay, you're no longer a member of this oppressive collective that tells you how to think, that makes you a cog in that machine. But now you're a member of a collective that draws its strength from its cohesion and adherence to a hierarchy, to rules, to a shared set of values, to all of these things, But now she's learning this lesson that, I can care for them, I can be responsible for them, but at the end of the day, it's just my decision, thinking on my feet under this extreme pressure, that then saves the day.
But I think the one problem that she's facing the entire time is, can she do this? With the Borg, she never asked that, can she do this? She's expected to do it,
Yeah.
So the big question is, where is the self-doubt? Where's the anxiety coming from, right?
Yeah.
I broke this down into a couple different categories. Who is responsible for Seven's self-doubt? Is it the Borg themselves, because they tore her away from the Hansons, as we saw in the Raven, which caused that memory to surface? Is it the crew of Voyager, because all of the reactions that she had in the hallucinations at the end of the episode are all reflections of her own self-doubt?
Yeah.
Maybe from back channeling, maybe from whispers she's heard in the hallway, maybe with direct confrontations with the crew. Yeah. So is her attitude what causes her self-doubt? Because she has been reprimanded for being insolent and combative, in a structured organization. Or is it Janeway herself that expects more out of Seven in order to further her own acceptance of humanity? It's not Seven's acceptance of humanity, it's Janeway's acceptance of her accepting humanity.
Yeah. Yes. You might need a chart, but yes. Yeah.
Right. So again, do you want all of this manifesting itself at the time when this person that you need to put trust in is in charge of 140 plus sleeper pods going through a nebula that can kill them if something goes wrong?
Well, but see, that's a conversation that neither Janeway nor Chakotay, I mean, Chakotay is asking, can we trust her more from that sense of like, oh, she's gone off the rails and done some things and tried to take over the ship before. Yes, I get that. But more to the point here is that psychologically, this is a crew person walking around with all of this difficulty underneath on the psychological level. And I would again say that the only person who is aware of it or even cares to ask is the Doctor. Janeway and Seven have had some nice moments. They had, a nice moment in the holodeck and Leonardo's workshop, but this is a big ask.
Call this a crazy idea, but do we need some emergency security holograms around here?
So here we are at the end of 1. That's such a short title.
It is.
But also very poignant.
It's not the shortest Star Trek title. Of course, you had the three-letter word BEM back in the animated series. And then we haven't gotten there yet, but you need to go to some future Star Trek episodes to have even shorter titles.
True.
Yeah.
And I also can't help but be reminded of one of my favorite U2 songs. So,
sure.
That's, And that's all I can say about that, so I don't want to get copyright stricken.
Exactly.
But anyway, we're at the end of our discussion of 1. A fantastic discussion, by the way, John. But as we do at the end of every mission log, we take a look at the episode and see if it holds up, if it withstand the tests of time, and then we go deeper into the morals, meanings, and messages if we were able to mine any of those. Yeah. So with 1, do you have one reaction? Do you have several reactions? How did you feel about
I have a few reactions, and again, as we do in this segment, is kind of just fair game to pick and choose and make your own assessment based on whatever criteria jump out at you. When I was talking in the trivia earlier about the path that this story took from the original pitch by James Swallow to being written by Jerry Taylor, but then, hands in between. Brian Fuller and Brannon Braga had their hands on it as well. I feel like, and let me preface this by saying there is no wrong or right way to create a good episode of television or a movie or a book or whatever.
John, there's no
one way. Yeah, they can be formed in many different ways. I feel like this is one of those episodes that they kind of knew where they wanted to go, and then they had to reverse engineer all the steps and all the reasons to get there. So sometimes that can feel a little forced. And I wonder if some of the conversation that we've had, particularly in the VAM, available only to you who are in our Patreon, when we're talking about some of the introduction of those hallucinated characters like the Borg drone or Loteric, does it feel a little like, okay, we're just stretching out some moments here because what we really want to do is just get to this point where Seven has to find it within herself to be the singular decision maker, to be the singular hero in this moment. And we get there. I think that's all fair. But it feels like there are many steps in between where it's like, okay, we're just kind of manufacturing these moments in order to get to the end. But that said, I think you have to ask yourself, is this a premise that holds up for that hour? And for our purposes, does it hold up in its replay value? Because as I was rewatching it, to me, I think I started to play the home game a bit. Like, oh, okay, here are the bits where it just starts with Seven's hallucination, and then that takes me out of it because I'm trying to kind of like solve it to get to the end. I think the first time you watch this, that has the most power to it. However, the star here, rightfully so, is Jeri Ryan in her performance. And focusing on the performance makes it really elevate past any kind of story nitpicks that I may have found. And believe me, It's just nitpicking for the sake of doing a podcast about Star Trek. Because all of this psychological stuff about Seven is very interesting in and of itself. We've already seen that Seven has a very active imagination. You can make the argument that the writers are having the most fun with this new character to the detriment of the others. But again, they are mining the most interesting character here. It's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point. I do wish that we got this kind of depth out of everyone else, but at least we're getting it. At least we're getting these very interesting, complex profiles of a character, if only we could get more. This episode is acted and directed very well. It makes such a nice companion piece to the episodes that we have already seen about Seven's journey specifically, like Raven. We called that one out already. I do ask myself if this will be enough to see other things on the show start to change. Like, will this show remember from week to week that we made a few steps in the progress of these characters' relationships and keep them moving forward? Or will we be back to where we were, making jokes at the expense of, Harry and Seven? I hope we're done with that, and I hope we've taken a bigger, bolder step to this very interesting tease about her forming some bonds socially with the crew. So only time will tell there. But that is a long-winded way of me saying that I do think this holds up on the strength of the character, on the strength of the performance, and fits very nicely, which is what I like to see, fits very nicely in relation to other episodes. How about you, Norman?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love this episode. It's going to be an absolute yes for me. And what I really enjoy about episodes like this, it has that kind of The Thing type of isolationism flavor in the narrative, where obviously Seven is alone and she has to face her, I can't believe I'm going to reference the previous episode, demons, alone.
Yeah,
I just led myself into door and I walked right through it. Yay me. And even though, like, you've mentioned this before, Jen, even though that, we're a little weary of, like, the Seven-centric stories that have been happening throughout the course of Season 4, and even though that this is about as Seven-centric as an episode can get, like The Raven, and I love that you and I both bring up The Raven because, again, it's such a high bar for this series in this season. I love that this story, it shows Seven at her best, and not in that Deus Ex Machina kind of way that she's been used throughout the course of the season to get them out of problems.
Yeah.
Or in that same kind of cadence where is it Janeway and Seven butting heads again to the point where not even just us, but actually characters in universe are making remarks of that.
Right.
So it becomes a little bit too much of its own meme. And when that happens, it becomes a little bit less believable in terms of the character development within the universe. That's not this episode. This episode is a wonderful exploration and an incredible narrative arc for this character that I think could have really benefited from it being that the corner that the crew and Seven were backed into in order for her to be able to step forward and accept the changes that are happening to her, as opposed to all these little side stories that force Seven into the forefront, where it became a little bit too combative at times, for our tastes. I think that in this episode, there's a great deal of agency that's thrust upon her. Like you said, is this the right person for the job? Is the only person for the job? And how do you step, into that responsibility, and how do you accept that with all the self-doubt that's working against her? Her character growth is examined through both internal and external forces, and I love how it's organically brought forward. Obviously, there were some references that have come from previous episodes, but that's where I wanted her evolution to come from references and not from standalone performances or center spotlight performances, because that gives an episode like this so much more credibility, more than it actually has or has it earned by being this particularly standout episode. I think that there's just something great about her acceptance of her character at the stage of this development, where she is in the series, and that statement maybe doesn't matter to her as much anymore when she says, I am bored. I think that she's past that. I think that that was more of a reaction and defensive mechanism to basically mask the truth of the change that she's going through.
Yeah.
And I think that we see that towards the end of the episode. But you're right. I agree that this episode hinges completely on Jerry Ryan. Jerry is absolutely brilliant in this episode, John, just like you said. You know, she's really brought something very special to the 7 of 9 character. Her acting's remarkable. She's completely believable in every respect to this character, because I think that not only does she, I think, understand the character from the get-go, but she, I think, does her homework and really takes like the craft of bringing this character to life seriously. I think that the emotional context she brings is true. I think the nuance she brings is very subtle and unique. I think that she understands Seven's isolationism, and maybe sometimes actors pull from something personal. So I don't know if that's something that inspires her performance, but it's definitely there. And I do see Jerry understanding through Seven the anxiety that young Annika Hansen suffered at the hands of the Borg when she was torn away from her family.
Yeah.
I see that come through ever so subtly, and I think that is worth noting. But also, Robert Picardo, how many times can we say does no wrong, right? Because he is also the other side of the equation of this episode, where his performance and Jerry's performance, they are the tides that raised each other's boats in this episode, right? Where they step up, the other steps up in kind, and it makes for a wonderful performance and very engaging to watch.
Well said, and we might as well get right to it with morals, meanings, messages. There's, there are some really simple lines in this episode that just really cut right to the psychological core of what's going on. Hearing 7 of 9 say, "I cannot function alone," rips your heart out, because it is so much more pronounced. We know her background. We know what she's going through. And that anxiety, that fear, we feel it in her performance. "You will die alone" is this terrifying, again, this just absolutely human experience, this very human fear foisted on her, having to deal with it, having to grow up, having been someone else, something else for so long, and now this flood of human experience that she has to deal with, boiled down to these like deeply existential, worrying, concerning points in her life in this story. But it made me think of something that we very often talk about in Star Trek, which is the idea of friends being the family that you choose. And absolutely, we can make the argument that Seven was taken away from the Borg, that this human identity has been kind of shaped around her in many ways, and she was so resistant at first. But a big part of her steps toward humanity is finding this new quote-unquote collective with the crew who are there. And it's not just being a member of a crew, it's not just being a member of Starfleet or a hierarchy, it is forming these social bonds. And I've said it already multiple times in the episode, but bookending the episode with those scenes in the fake holodeck environment, and then the real moment in the mess hall at the end, says so much. Seven is going through the crisis here that I think has led a lot of our other favorite characters in Star Trek specifically to do this thing, to choose their family of friends and to make these social connections rather than have them forced on you, as happened to her before and in her life as Borg. And sometimes that is a lesson that is very subtle, and you just kind of see it as like the feel-good moment in the episode. I think with Seven, it is forged in a kind of trauma, but I think we all feel like it only leads to better things to her in the end. So I hope that's where we are on the path with 7 of 9 here in the series and in this episode in particular. How about you, Norman?
Well, I think a lot of us, we've heard that old adage, that old axiom, there's no I in team.
Right.
You know, and that's probably the most cursory way of describing the moral meaning and message. All three I found, I believe, in this episode for me. when I really boiled it all down, I typed this phrase into Google, and I asked Google, what does it mean to be human? And it came up with a series of answers, definitions, websites that I wanted to visit. But I landed on something that I thought was of particular interest from the Smithsonian National History Museum website in an article also titled, What Does It Mean to Be Human? And I found this particular section of this article relevant to Seven from not only an in-universe perspective, but from an anthropological perspective, right? Because this episode is about forming communities, wanting to be part of those communities, not alienating ourselves from the joy and the benefit of participating in these communities. And there is something that I still think at the beginning of this episode that she was fighting, something within herself, and what I believe to be this urge to be part of a community that we saw at the beginning and at the end of this episode, like you brought up with the awkwardness of her asking her quote unquote friends certain questions and not really caring to facilitate the exercise, and then at the end where she is longing to be part of that community. Quote from the website, quote, modern humans are part of many communities that encourage sharing and cooperation, sometimes among people who have never even met. These alliances enrich our lives and enable us to share expertise and the risks of survival. They can also pose serious conflicts among people of different communities. End quote. Sharing, cooperation, alliances, shared expertise, risks of survival, conflicts. These are all human evolutionary qualities on display in this episode. And in my opinion, they perfectly illustrate the moral meaning and message that I believe, are all supposed to come away with after watching Seven's arc in One. What it means to be human is to work together in order to grow, to thrive, to evolve, to change, and to share these experiences together, not separately, and most certainly not alone, and also to embrace the diversity of self, to believe in your worth as an individual as well as a member of community. And I'd like to bring this all the way around to a quote by Gene Roddenberry. Quote, to be different is not necessarily to be ugly. To have a different idea is not necessarily to be wrong. The worst possible thing is for all of us to begin to look and talk and act and think alike. End quote.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you'd like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, hope and fear.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers, Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, Julie Miller, Mike Richards, Mike Shadable, Paul Shadwell, and David Takechi. Seven's technique of asking her crewmates about themselves just needs an outlet. Is Neelix still doing his morning show? End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.